Well, joining me now in the studio is former IDF spokesman, Lieutenant Colonel Jonathan Conricus. Great to see you in person. Your reaction, first of all, to that interview?
Well, I think he's a very eloquent spokesperson, and I give him credit for appropriating all of the right Western liberal buzzwords in order to carry and represent a very backwards, cruel, brutal regime that, from my perspective as an Israeli who lives in Israel and intends on continuing to live there, is really the source of most of the instability, violence, terror and bloodshed that Israeli civilians face. And he does a good job at distorting reality. He lies very well and he appropriates Western culture. But I think for people that have, basic knowledge of what's going on in the Middle East, definitely for Israelis who face the bullets and the terror and the bombs of Iranian proxies, that really doesn't strike a tone. And I think he's a good spokesperson. And maybe now that the Minister of Foreign Affairs died in an accident, he could represent Iran and he could do a good job of selling it to unwilling or unwitty people in the West, and they may fall for that kind of rhetoric.
What is your belief about the number of people in Iran who detest the regime?
I don't know. And it's very difficult to know. There are people at FDD, where I work, Foundation for Defense of Democracies, who track the amount of protests and unrest and the way that people in Iran voice their hatred or their dissent towards this oppressive regime. Sadly, there used to be a heat map of those protests around the country. That heat map is today totally blank. The regime has been very effective, very harsh in actually taking down all of those protests, and most people are either dead or imprisoned or otherwise silenced. So they're quite effective. But the East German regime was quite effective until it wasn't. And the Soviet regime was quite effective and cast a long shadow until it wasn't. The Iranian regime, just like every other repressive regime, every other non-democratic regime, will go the same place, they have a place reserved in the trash bin of history. The ilks of that professor, even though he's very eloquent, he will be alongside the same people. And I think it will be a very good thing for the Middle East. It will be great for stability and prosperity in the Middle East once that regime is gone.
Do you believe President Raisi died in an accident, or, as some people believe, could it have been a deliberate?
Yeah, of course, that was obvious that people would think that it was something deliberate. Some of the enemies of the Islamic Republic, the US, Israel, as far as I know, and I have asked Israeli officials, did Israel have any part in it? Clear, unequivocal no. Israel didn't, and I don't think that the US had either. And we know from past experiences in Israel as well, helicopters do crash and people do die when they fly.
He was called the Butcher of Tehran. Was that a justified name?
For good reason. I've spoken with Mark Dubovitz at FDD. He's been following Raisi and his ilk for the better part of 25 years. The list of atrocities, of cruel hangings out in the middle of the street in order to terrorize other people to fall in line and to act in accordance with the regime, the executions, the rape, the torture. If the professor would be sincere enough to go on Twitter and look at testimonials of Iranian men and women who are now in safety in the West, telling their stories of torture and very cruel treatment of them, then the picture of who Raisi was would be much clearer. And yes, the Butcher of Tehran, I think, is a good description of who he was.
Will his death have any real consequence for the regime?
So the second sentence that the supreme leader said in an audio message was, "Our dear citizens of Iran, do not fear. There will not be any rupture of services of governmental services," which is translated in plain language. Don't even think about revolting because we have this under wraps and this is not an opportunity for you to rise up. And I don't think that it will. I think that the Middle East will be a much better place once the Iranian regime is relegated to the dustbin of history, but I'm not sure that this is enough for that to happen.
Let's move to another breaking story today. This is the International Criminal Court seeking arrest warrants for various Hamas leaders and also for Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu on charges of war crimes, crimes against humanity over what has been going on in this war. These allegations, which have been put there against Netanyahu and Gallant, who of course the Minister of Defense of Israel, so they bear criminal responsibility for the following war crimes and crimes against humanity committed on the territory of the State of Palestine in the Gaza Strip from October the 8th. Starvation of civilians as a method of warfare, as a war crime, contrary to Article 8 of the statute. Willfully causing great suffering or serious injury to body or health, or cruel treatment as a war crime. Willful killing, contrary to Article 8.2, or murder as a war crime, contrary to Article 8.2, B2, I think it is, 8.2? 8.2. Intentionally directing attacks against a civilian population as a war crime, contrary to Articles 8.2. Extermination and or murder, contrary to Articles 7.1, 7.1, including in the context of deaths caused by starvation as a crime against humanity, and persecution as a crime against humanity, contrary to Article 7.1. These are incredibly serious charges that the International Criminal Court has laid down. What is your response to this?
For me, this is a very sad day. As an Israeli, as someone who believes that I believe in the international system of law and order, for me, this is a betrayal. I see a power-drunk prosecutor overstepping his boundaries, overstepping his jurisdiction, and making a totally unfounded, political, biased decision against a democracy. If Raisi was alive today, he should have been subpoenaed and indicted. He never was. Neither was Bashar al-Assad. Neither was Muammar Gaddafi or many other leaders who actually did war crimes and horrible crimes against humanity, were proud to do it, but they were never indicted. And to see these kinds of allegations, and of course the criminal court has to approve of it, of Prosecutor Khan's recommendations, and I really hope that the court doesn't, and upholds the last level of legitimacy of the ICC. They have an opportunity to do that. If they concur with the prosecutor, with the power-drunk prosecutor, I think this is a really black day in the history of the ICC. I'm sad to see it. I think they are morally unfounded, reprehensible, and really a prize for the ilks of the professor that spoke before, the Iranian regime, and terrorists worldwide. They are rejoicing.
There are many people who believe the following, that what Hamas did was a shameful terror attack, which took the lives of 1,200 people and wounded nearly 7,000 more, that it was horrific and completely unacceptable and should be condemned immediately. But who also believe that notwithstanding Israel's right, if not a duty to protect its people, particularly given Hamas's stated intent to keep doing these kind of attacks, that the response by Israel has now gone way too far, that the civilian casualty toll in an area densely populated with so many of them being under 18, half the country under 18, that the death toll on children, which whatever figure you take is generally accepted, is well over 10,000 now, and women who've got nothing to do with this, obviously, that this has gone too far. America certainly believes this and thinks that the next phase, the final phase, as Netanyahu has put it, of attacking Rafah, where there are hundreds of thousands, if not millions of people waiting to see what their fate may be, that all of this is too much, too far, that Israel needs to stop. What do you say?
I think that those people, I welcome them and I want to listen to their opinion, but I welcome them to live in Israel and to be in southern Israel and to understand that a simple civilian cannot live safely within their homes in the internationally recognized borders of Israel. 47 partition plan, 48 Israel, 49 armistice, all of the lines are on our side. Israelis cannot live safely as long as Hamas exists. Now, it would be easier for Israel, and it would be easier for Palestinians if Hamas came out and fought Israel, not hiding behind civilians. It would make life much easier for us, and it would spare a lot of civilians. But Hamas chooses not to, and they leave Israel with actually no choice. It's either forfeiting the responsibility to defend sovereign Israel and to defend Israeli civilians, or avoiding killing Palestinians. And unfortunately, what Israel is left with is two hard choices, but I think any country, any government, and whether you like Prime Minister Netanyahu or you don't, it doesn't matter. Any government has the responsibility to protect
There's
its
increasing
civilians.
evidence that the Americans are putting forward that it's simply not working, that Hamas is regrouping in the north, which has been pretty much demolished, but they're regrouping in the north, and that all you will achieve by going into Rafah and killing, in the process of going after the remaining Hamas battle groups, all you will achieve is killing thousands and thousands more civilians in the process, and that is simply not worth going after the remaining members of Hamas. That you've made your point. You've decimated Gaza. You've wiped out
That wasn't the point. The point wasn't to decimate Gaza.
No,
as far as I understand.
But
the point is
I understand
to
that,
defeat
but
Hamas.
that has been the consequence of the way the war's been executed.
Right.
And, even for someone like me that has often, to great controversial response from pro-Palestinian groups, has consistently tried to take people back to October the 7th and say you have to start from a place of condemning this appalling terror attack and understanding Israel has a right to defend itself, that there have to be limits.
Yeah. In terms of running the war, I believe that we could have been past taking Rafah already. 7 months have passed, and in terms of momentum, there's a military principle of continuity and that you keep the pressure on the enemy. We failed that. We didn't keep the pressure on Hamas. We were held back by Hamas dangling the hostages in front of us, and that allowed us to be sidetracked, sadly, out of a commitment to get our hostages back, our 128 remaining hostages. That was what delayed the invasion of Rafah. Now, many people told me and others that Rafah cannot be evacuated, that there's 1.1 million Palestinians there.
Where are they all going to go?
First of all, they already have went. They're not where are they going to go. They have gone. They've gone to the Muassi and they've gone to the outskirts of Khan Yunis.
You think they've all just left Rafah?
800,000, and again, I don't like quoting UNRWA, but I will quote UNRWA. 800,000 Palestinians have left Rafah as per UNRWA, and that's 3 days ago.
So how many are left?
So there's maybe 200,000, maybe 300,000 left.
But there were said to be 1.5 million there.
And they will leave as well. And in any area where the Israeli troops are, I would say that there's between 95% of the population has already left.
But what are you actually trying to achieve here? Because you see your war cabinet of 3 people already splintering.
Yeah.
They can't agree on what happens next. Netanyahu, driven, it seems to me, by the more hard-right members of his cabinet, is being taken to a place which most people find completely unacceptable, where Israel would have kind of military occupation of Gaza in perpetuity going forward with no time limit. Nobody wants to see that. Nobody wants to see...
Neither does the IDF, and neither does the defense establishment. But I think that we're in a situation where, if we want to fast forward this, what's the aim?
So you don't agree with that?
What I think needs to happen, what I agree with, is that Israel has to defeat Hamas. As cliche as it sounds, for there to be a different future for Gazans.
But what does the future look like?
For there to be a different future for Gazans and a different future for Israelis, Hamas has to be defeated, but not only defeated, not like the Taliban wasn't defeated. Hamas needs to be defeated in such a way that will inspire confidence with Palestinians to be brave enough to take a step towards a different Gaza.
How do you do that by killing all their kids?
You don't. We try very hard not to kill their kids.
Yeah, but you are killing a lot of their kids.
Kids have been killed, but I think that there is a...
Do you know how many?
Oh, that's a good question.
Well, it was a question. I want to play a clip. This is from Avi Hyman's interview I did with him, where he told me exactly how many Hamas terrorists have been killed. Yeah. But when I tried to get him to say how many civilians, he said this. So how many civilians do you believe you've killed?
We don't have exact figures. As you know, it's the fog of war.
That's quite extraordinary. You're an official spokesman for the Israeli government, and you have no idea how many civilians you've killed.
It's not that I don't know. I'm not authorized to give the information. I don't have the information.
That's complete nonsense. Why are you authorized to give me the number of terrorists you've killed, but not the number of civilians? I don't understand. Can you explain? Why is it you've kept a record of one, but not the other?
I personally don't have that information to give to you. You can ask me over and over. I'm not going to come up with more information. I don't personally have that.
Know. I mean, he didn't seem to know, but I found it extraordinary that he wanted to sound convincing that he knew exactly how many terrorists had been killed by the IDF, but he wouldn't prepared to even give me a ballpark figure of civilians.
Right. And the ballpark figure that I have, based on IDF and also what the Prime Minister said a few days ago in an interview in one of the American networks, is that we're talking about 18,000 civilians as opposed to 14,000 or perhaps 15,000 combatants. Those are the numbers I know. But, you know, we have to be fair.
How do you know?
Exactly. We have to be fair. Nobody really knows. Counting dead terrorists is a very difficult thing to do, and counting dead civilians or non-combatants sometimes is even more difficult because all of the combatants dress as civilians. So you
don't really know, do you?
It's difficult to know. There are assessments made in good faith by the Israeli intel, by the Israeli military, that take different sources. UNRWA, Hamas Health Ministry, Hamas propaganda, and what our troops see on the ground as well. And then they compile it together and they give an estimate. And this has been said that we estimate that there's such and such many people killed. It's, I think, much better than what Hamas and the UN institutions have been doing, which is just peddling false information.
But let me take you
legitimacy.
So you think that the Rafah invasion should happen?
I think that Israel has no choice but to defeat Hamas.
So take me through what happens. You go through Rafah.
Right. You take out the tunnels.
You take out the tunnels, hopefully.
Yep.
Right.
Hopefully, if you find the hostages.
Yeah. At what point do you know you've got rid of Hamas?
Also a very good question. And I think that's a combination of military capabilities, leaders. We have to take symbols, either Sinwar or Def, or the two of them, and some type of moment where enough Hamas combatants understand that there's nothing left to fight for. As long as the tunnels are open, Hamas knows that the moment the Israeli troops withdraw from Gaza, they will rebuild their capabilities and they will be able to come out of hiding.
How do you kill the ideology?
You don't kill the ideology, just like ISIS
and
doesn't kill.
How do you not expect that ideology, which fueled October the 7th, not to be equally fueled by the slaughter of so many children?
I don't think that there was what you described. I don't think that is the case. I think that Israel has gone to great lengths in order to minimize
But you can't
killing.
dispute there's been a slaughter of children. I mean,
I can't dispute that they've been killed.
You would argue it's justified collateral damage
for
going after a terror group. Okay, that's an argument.
Yeah.
But you can't deny there has been a mass slaughter of children.
No, I wouldn't put it in those words. I would say that, yes, unfortunately,
whatever words you want to use,
non-combatants have been killed. And it's regrettable.
But
unfortunately,
so many children have been killed.
Children have been killed, women have been killed.
And my point is, if you lost a child in this, why would you not gravitate to the ideology of the people who want to hit back?
I've lost friends. I've lost friends on the 7th of October. Civilian friends. I've had friends whose bodies are held by Hamas. I have a friend, he's military, but his body has been held by Hamas and his family is in grieving without a tomb to cry on. That doesn't turn me into a raving jihadist just because my enemies are cruel to me. That doesn't justify it. And the issue here of intention, the intention of Israel is not to kill civilians. We are doing a lot in order to minimize the killing of civilians.
Once this war is over, and thank God please that it ends sooner rather than later, what is the next step? I mean, who runs Gaza? Netanyahu seems to be moving, as I said, towards a place where there's a military occupation, an Israeli military occupation, which is exactly what my next guest will almost certainly say. That's exactly what has got us to this place in the first place.
Yeah, I think that's what's missing at this current stage is a clear Israeli plan that has US backing and regional buy-in that says this is the alternative to Hamas.
What do you think it should be?
I think it should be Palestinian rule based on civil society
Which
in
Palestinians?
Gazans. That's exactly why I said in the beginning that first Hamas needs to be defeated. Until Hamas is defeated, they will be the fallback. There will be a Hamas 2.0 if they are not roundly and decisively defeated. Once they are, and I believe that they can be, contrary to what many people think, believe, or wish against Israel, I think that Hamas can be defeated for the better for Palestinian civilians and for the better of Gaza.
So the Palestinians would run Gaza.
First of all, I think we have to talk about an interim period. This isn't going to be democracy in an instant. It's going to be a transition period. There will need to be some kind of international helping hand, American, Arab, Israeli. We will have to make sure that it doesn't become
And does that lead
Taliban
to the formation
state.
of a Palestinian state?
I don't know. I think that what I would
Why
like to
shouldn't
say,
they be allowed their own state?
I think that there should eventually be a peaceful solution to
Why
our
shouldn't
conflicts.
Palestinians which they haven't had for many decades now.
Frankly,
why shouldn't they have exactly the same rights?
Frankly, because
as you do.
Frankly, first of all, rights is a different matter, but what they have shown through corruption, poor leadership, and a draw towards extremism is that they aren't ready and they're not capable.
Your own Prime Minister is facing corruption charges.
He is indeed.
What's the difference?
Well, there is a difference between the Palestinian Authority, between the Palestinian Authority and the Israeli government.
You say that there's corruption on their side. There's corruption, alleged corruption on your side.
If you ask
with your leader,
if you ask the average Palestinian how corrupt the PA is, I think that you'll get a very decisive answer about it. Mahmoud Abbas is in his 19th year of a 4-year term. That is something that cannot fly. And I'm appalled by the fact that this organization is touted as the solution for the day after in Gaza.
Is Benjamin Netanyahu the solution to anything here now? Because most Israelis, from the polls I've seen, they support finishing this war, but they do not support him remaining as Prime Minister once it's over.
I think that's correct. And what I think we need in Israel, I think that what we need in Israel is unity around a leadership that has the trust of the Zionist majority in Israel.
Who is that person?
Yet to be really established, but it definitely...
Who would be a candidate for you?
Well, there are many. There are many that
give me a good one.
Well, I think that there are... I don't want to get into politics and give my endorsement.
No, I'm just curious who people like you may think could be a contender for that very crucial position going forward.
I think that what needs to happen now is for a process to start whereby the trust of the Zionist Jewish population is re-won by the leadership. That isn't the situation today. And of course, our enemies are benefiting from it, from the fact that there is not enough cohesion and that we're lacking in unity. And as you said, the cabinet is struggling in providing a strategy going forward that serves Hamas, it serves the Iranians, and it serves the Palestinian Authority. Sadly, it doesn't serve the Israeli citizens.
I mean, the one lesson we've learned, surely, from this millennium is don't start a war if you've got no plan for after the war ends.
Well, Israel didn't start it.
They would say on the other side that this didn't start on October the 7th.
Yes, they can go back to the Balfour Declaration, and they can go back to 1882. Really less significant from my point of view. Israel has offered the Palestinians 4 different opportunities for statehood to end the conflict. Each and every time, Israel got a no. And they were sincere offers with maps, land swaps, population swaps, etc. And all of those very honest and sincere proposals got a no, because no Palestinian leader until this day has been able to say, yes, I want to end the conflict.
OK, Lieutenant Colonel, thank you very much.
Thank you
for joining me.